Just give it 30 more seconds and then we'll begin. A strange thing happened to me. I've got this lecture which I'm doing on Wednesday, which is on the idea of post-contemporary or beyond contemporary. When I did it, I think I did the first lecture about 5 years ago, and it started on the theme of California dreaming, and it had this Hockney painting which was painted in California, and then it had a kind of a thing to do with devastation and fire starting. But it wasn't done in relationship to the present. It was done in relationship to a kind of anticipation of fires. So it's very strange, the kind of feeling of, do I erase it and start all over again, or do I keep the idea of out of time, out of touch? So touch. Who'd like to start reading?
I can start.
Good.
Feeling, affect, senses, performativity, gesture, body, inscription, immersion, haptic, play, caress. Aristotle theorized touch as an embodied disavowal of distance and therefore brings contact into play. Fra Angelico, The Mocking of Christ with Virgin and Saint Dominic, 1442.
That's it's in the San Marco Museum in Florence, which is a monastery, and he painted these small frescoes on each of the cells. So the monk had a bed, a window, a painting, and a Bible for 3 months. So in a way, there's a way of working out the relationship between the image, the text, and experience. But this is a very strange painting that it's kind of kinetic. It's different gestures in one space.
Touch is unlike the other senses in that it ranges beyond a single sense organ from skin to the interior of the body. In this, it meditates primary ways relating the relationship of the body to the world. Sight is, to be sure, an openness and a consciousness, and all sensibility, opening as consciousness, is called vision. But even in its subordination to cognition, sight maintains contact and proximity. The visible caresses the eye. One sees and hears like one touches. Levinas. Haptic perception involves touch, as opposed to verbal or visual registers. Josefe de Ribera, The Sense of Touch, 1615 to 1616.
That was Baroque period.
Visible and mobile, my body is a thing amongst things. It's caught in the fabric of the world, and its cohesion is that of a thing. But because it moves itself and sees, it holds things in a circle around itself. Maurice Merleau-Ponty, Pinaco Seki.
The Buto dancer.
Our eyes are not capable of seeing, nor even contemplating intimacy, at least not directly. They can only imagine something about intimacy from the light, the gestures, the words that it radiates. But intimacy as such will remain invisible, irreducible to appropriation, and thus strange to the logic of Western discourse, to the logos, except in its delusion, it lacks its derelictions and artificial ecstasies. Intimacy allows itself neither to be seen nor to be seized. Nevertheless, it is probably the core of our being, and any attempt to appropriate it risks annihilating its being itself. However, it is not a question of magic, of irrationality, of madness. It is a question of touch. Lucy Irigaray, Sharing the World. Nan Golding, Jen's hand on Clemens' back, Paris. There are 4 sections to this presentation, but one main idea, that art advances through effects rather than rational design being central. The Enlightenment relegated the senses in order to impose distance within judgment. Touch works contrary to this by generating patterns of immersion. The primary of the touch feel of the world is what art discovers as its medium of becoming. The body. Nietzsche was one of the first philosophers to make the body as the affirmative center of philosophy. In part, this was the means of going beyond the mind-body dualism, and with this, the primacy of thinking being coupled with seeing, which is the basis of metaphysics. Egyptian female figure, 3,500 to 3,400 BC. For Merleau-Ponty, the body is the primary site of knowing that the world as distinct from the tradition of placing consciousness as the source of knowledge. The body and that which is perceived cannot be separated from each other, forming the flesh of the world as a non-dualistic attribute. Dionysius Phidias, 4th century BC. Classical Greek sculpture combines mimetic semblance with an inner sense of vitality. There is almost a feeling of pulsation which serves to project an aliveness. Winged Victory of Samothrace, 2nd century BC.
The Louvre in Paris. There's always a crowd of people around it. It was taken by Napoleon from Italy. And after that, the Italians passed a law saying that there could be no export of antiquities.
The naked body is adorned with jewelry, as if to elevate flesh into another realm of being. The excess of the body serves to stimulate the feeling of excess within nature itself, and almost magical fertility is an outcome of this vitalism. Yakshini, Sunga dynasty, 1st BC or 1st AD. Shiva as an ascetic, pre-Angkor period, Cambodia.
That was about the 8th century, 8th, 9th century.
Celestial dancer, Devata, mid-11th century, northern India. Esteemed monks would announce their death in advance of it occurring so that they might meditate on the process of this passage. Chogen Kamakura, 1200 Japan. Depictions of David by Verrocchio, Donatello, Michelangelo, Donatello, and Bernini. Michelangelo, Crouching Boy, 1530 to 34. Gian Lorenzo Bernini, Bacchanal, a faun tased by children, 1616 to 17.
And he is incredible sculptor. He makes flesh look really like marble, look like flesh, or feel like flesh, or you see fingers sinking into the flesh. One of the great technical stone carvers in the history of art.
Bernini transforms sculpted stone into a flesh-like substance. There is a sensual embodiment to each of the works which mediate a sense of livingness. In Bernini's depiction of Medusa, 1640s, is of the moment when she is faced by the transformation into a monster is captured.
His Rodin, one of his small, he did a lot of just experimental sculptures where he took bits of hands and small figures and joined them together.
I hadn't seen this one before. I'd seen some previous maquettes. This is beautiful.
I mean, in a way, it was collaging with sculpture, with fragments.
Hands of Rodin with a female figure, 1917. Hands of a pianist. Rodin's sculpted hands to exercise his continual fascination with the expressive possibilities of them. Brancusi, The Kiss, 1907 to 08. Jacob Epstein, The Rock Drill, 1913 to 15. Giacometti, The Hand, 1947. Painting. Painting is always on the threshold. It makes up the threshold between intactness and touching, between intactness and touching of light and shadow. Jean-Luc Nancy. Titian, Danae and the Shower, 1554. Towards the end of his life, Titian was said to have painted with his hands and fingers to blend and blur paint together, so as to go beyond vision and bring semblance closer to the body. Rubens painted the four continents in the 1610s It depicts the female personifications of all these continents and the four main rivers of the world. Diego Velázquez, the triumph of... Sorry, I missed that bit.
That's a painting.
Velasco painted the Triumph of Bacchus in 1628 to 29. He combines dense underpainting with a network of glazes which create immediacy to the depiction.
There's a shimmer to Velasquez's painting. The brush marks kind of appear and disappear at different distances. Very often there's not a definite line within them. It's all different levels and layers of paint. Rembrandt.
Rembrandt painted The Jewish Bride between 1665 to 69. The painting mixes rich impasto with delicate washes to achieve its richly modulated surface.
Oh, we have a new reader. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Who's going to read?
I can read if you like. Manet painted a bar at the Folies Bergère in 1882. He was influenced by the work of Velázquez in his vivid depiction of shimmering surfaces.
It's Degas in the National Gallery.
Degas painted Combing the Hair in 1896, and it was typical of his closely observed intimate scenes of women in interior situations. A deep red permeates the overall visual scene, and at the center of the composition, the comb glides through the hair, combining what can be seen with what can be felt.
This is the late Monet. Water Lily Gardens.
The late paintings of Monet present both a vision of his garden, but also an affective encounter with it. This constituted an intertwining of the visible and the invisible, something that the philosopher Merleau-Ponty described as the flesh of the world. Bonnard's paintings captured an abundance of surfaces, as if all equally alive and in the act of seemingly breathing colour. Bonnard Newton and Bathtub, 1946. Pablo Picasso, Weeping Woman, 1937. There is an active relationship between the body and pain. Lyotard states that thinking and suffering overlap because thinking something new is itself painful. Willem de Kooning, Rosy Fingered Dawn at Loy's Point, 1963.
He used very big brushes, which he started his life as an interior decorator in Holland. He always kept the brushes, big brushes.
Willem de Kooning worked with massive brushes in order to achieve his vast sweeps of pigment. There is a feeling of pulse within the paint, as if it has collected an energetic force from within. I wanted to get back to a feeling of light in painting. I wanted to get in touch with nature, not painting scenes from nature, but to get a feeling of that light that was very appealing to me. Willem de Kooning, Untitled, 1961. Helen Frankenthaler, Leprechaun, 1991. Helen Frankenthaler extended the language of mark making by employing sponges and clothes to apply paint to the canvases. Soakings, saturations, dribbles, veils, splurges, all manifested a vibrancy of surface effects, and with this, an enhanced sensuality. Quattrocento, 1968. Philip Guston, Stationary Figure, 1974. Francis Bacon, Figure Study 11, 1945 to 6. In his early paintings, Francis Bacon went in search of a relationship with the physical act of painting and the discovery of the image. Jenny Saville, Viz and Ramin 1, 2018.
Is Cecily Brown.
Cecily Brown's influences ranged from late Titian, Rubens, late Rembrandt to Kooning and Bacon in terms of painterly effects. The entire surface becomes animated with marks that redistribute foregrounds and backgrounds into a sea of paint for the viewer to become immersed. American independent underground film. Maya Deren was a filmmaker, but also a choreographer, dancer, theorist, and poet. In her experimental short black and white films, she employed jump cutting, slow motion, superimposition, and multiple exposures in which the personal and the aesthetic is always political. Meshes of the Afternoon, 1943, 14 minutes. At Land, 1944, 14 minutes, silent. Study.
It's just a list.
Okay. Jack Smith was one of the early pioneers of underground cinema and performance art. The film Flaming Creatures, 1963, was a satire on Hollywood B-movies, but was deemed to be in part pornographic. He is seen as one of the first proponents of the aesthetics of camp or trash. All. Stan Brakhage explored many techniques for the production of films, including painting directly onto celluloid, handheld camera work, scratching on film, collaging, multiple exposures, fast cutting, and in-camera editing. Stan Brakhage, RageNet, 1988. One thing I knew for sure from my own dreaming was that what one dreams just before waking structures the following day. That dream material is gathered from the previous day and therefore is a gathering of all previous days. Ergo contains the structure of all history, of all man. I wanted Prelude to be a created dream for the work that follows, rather than surrealism, which takes its inspiration from dream. I stayed close to practical usage of dream material in terms of learning and studying for a while before editing. At this time, I left strict misconsiderations out of my study process as much as possible. Stan Brakhage speaking on Dog Star Man. Warhol produced films out of the fabric of everyday life in the factory. The film The Couch, 1964, is just a serial depiction of bodies intertwined into different combinations of touching and caressing. There's no narrative for this, so no reason other than it is a possibility. Carol Sheeman was an experimental artist who opened out the intersection of film, performance, and painting. Her film Fuses, 1967, was made up of rushes spliced out of her with her lover, overlaid by colour and marks, which add vibrancy to the surface of the film. Performance, Interior Scroll, 1975. Weaving. Hans Memling, Still Life with a Jug and Flowers, 15th century. Gentile Bellini, Madonna and Child Enthroned, late 15th century. Prayer Rug, Bellini type, late 15th century. Ottoman, 18th century. Ottoman, 16th to 17th century. Carpet weaving introduced ways of abstracting nature into discrete patterns of abstraction. In the Renaissance, Ottoman rugs and carpets complemented the visual language of painting, providing a rich visual tapestry that contrasted to three-dimensional depiction. The carpets represented both luxury but also mystery that elevated the presentation of the different dimensions. Peter Bole, Still Life with Globe and Parrot, 1658. Dutch still life painting of the 17th century invariably mixed organic elements with the inorganic or crafted worlds into a contest of attention. Objects were not only brought into the proximity of sight, but the sense of being close to touch also. Kashgai Kilim, Iran.
That's from South Persia. The nomadic people.
Central Asian ikat costume, 19th century. Bolivian weaver. Japanese basket weaving is both a craft tradition related to everyday functions and a highly refined aesthetic practice, generating unique forms. Touch and the ancient senses of the empire, multi-century approaches to Roman culture, taking a stance on touching, Jean-Luc Nancy. and Noli Me Tangere, Nancy. Haptic Modernism, Abby Garrington. The Senses of Touch, Haptics, Affects and Technologies by Mark Patterson. Treasures of Light, Vision and Touch in Irigai, Levinas and Merleau-Ponty by Catherine Vassalou. Empire of the Senses, The Sensual Culture Reader, edited by David Bowles, I think. Howes. Touch by Richard Kearney, Recovering Our Most Vital Sense, and Touch, Sensuous Theory and Multisensory Media. Titian's Touch, Art, Magic and Philosophy by Maria H. Lowe. The Skin of the Film, Intercultural Cinema, Embodiment and the Senses by Laura Marks. Michael Ondate, Haptic Aesthetics and Micropolitical Writing. We talk about staying in touch, yet our lives are increasingly mediated by electronic contact, which imposes distance. Then we talk about being in touch with who we are, but at the same time being out of touch with ourselves. We are being touched by the paradoxes of touching.
Any thoughts?
I think I found the images of the sculptures far more sensual and haptic than when comparing with a lot of the paintings. There was something, whether it's the three-dimensional shadow and light playing on the physical object, but or whether I'm just more biased towards sculpture, I don't know. But I felt that quite strongly with the presentation.
Anyone agree with that?
I was just thinking who was the guy who was working straight on the celluloid?
Brackage.
Brackage. I was thinking that kind of spoke to me quite a lot about almost like a stronger desire for touch than the sculpture showed. In a way, it was more like, where does this kind of excess go? You know, and I think actually it was making me think that just in terms of the digital, how, you know, there's a kind of a frontier, I guess, that I'm sure that we'll cross, where a previously ungraspable thing, being an image, becomes graspable in some way, and it's a very different type of touch.
Yeah, in Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, they have the feelies as opposed to the movies that they go to. And maybe that's sort of, the sculptures are, at least the ones I remember being shown in this presentation, are things to be seen visually. So they're kind of, you know, in their comfort zone, as it were, as we look at them on our screens, whereas the carpets, for example, you know, were we to imagine ourselves barefooted walking across the Kashgar carpet in a tent in southern Iran, that might be quite an intense haptic experience.
I mean, they collect the dyes as well from the plants and insects and So from proximity, I mean, often they move about and you see the changes in color, the same pattern, but the color changes because they can't get the exact same pigment again out of the environment. So they're like there's a process whereby the collecting of the dyes and the making of the dyes is also a very, very touch feel experience.
Thinking about that, something I sort of reflected on was there was a quote in your presentation from Leotard, which was to the effect of thinking something new is painful. And I thought about that in relation to a quotation from your memory presentation that I quite like, which is desire is a memory of the future. And there's something kind of, at first reflection, that's an interesting idea that something new is inherently painful when we think it. Because I might think of thinking something new as quite sort of free or quite liberating or quite escapist, potentially quite euphoric. So why should it be painful? And I suppose the only way I can sort of think that through is that to think something new is a sort of an erosion or a corrosion or a decay of the old. And so thinking something new involves loss and potentially painful grief. So the idea of desire as the memory suggests that that's actually not something new. It's sort of a reorientation of things that one's already kind of experienced. And in relation to the Qashqai, I don't know, I wonder if there is a sense of kind of a passage of time and a loss and a mourning if one moves from pasture to pasture and one finds that the plants that one was previously able to rely upon are no longer present. One has to find new colours. But that was how I was trying to think through that idea of thinking something new as painful. I'd be interested if that kind of touched anyone else in a different way.
I was thinking, yeah, I mean, relatively similarly, that in a way, you know, you think about a new thought as involving making new neural connections in some way, which inevitably involves breaking old ones. And like you say, desire is something, I guess, related to a lack, whereas, so the object of desire is something that you can already conceive of and is therefore in the past. And so in this kind of destructive process of maybe like letting go of the object of desire, you move towards something new, and it's a kind of, it just involves a loss in order to you know, be able to become a creative act or something. I don't know, that's not fully worked out.
No, pain is a strong word.
Found it.
I was just trying to get my screen to work. All right. Can't get the screen to work.
So, Jonathan, you made a reference in the beginning of your presentation there about after the Enlightenment. So, before Descartes and the Enlightenment, where do you think, at least in the Western world, that touch would have been relative to the senses and perception?
I mean, definitely the Enlightenment was, with its rationalization, made the senses into secondary. So Descartes, in his method, eliminated the effective encounter. It was sensory. So that was a revolution. So it presupposes that before it was a more mobile relationship between the body and the mind. I mean, Descartes was very strict. I mean, it was very severe subordination of the senses.
Didn't it also happen in literary world, say Romanticism and all the others sort of gave way to more of logical thinking and stream of consciousness and this sort of thing?
I mean, the other thing about the Enlightenment, it was very masculinist.
Mm.
So the Enlightenment saw a purging of witches and female healers.
Also, the general linkage of, say, male logic, straight line, female emotion, curves, that sort of dualistic comparison.
Can I just chip in where I couldn't get the sound up, but I was going to say something about Lyotard, in that he was interested in the limits of language. And I thought and how knowledge, the new of knowledge expressed in language goes beyond, is how he was trying to break those limits. And I was just interested in, oh, sorry, I haven't got everyone's names up, but how you were talking about new neurological pathways. And I can really relate to that when you're trying to push your mind beyond its limit and learn new things that maybe other people already know, but you don't know yourself, like learning a new language, or even like for me, writing my PhD, I was really stretching myself, in this attempt to understand something new. So I understand that in relation to pain, it's like the pain of your brain when you're trying to stretch it beyond its limits and maybe, yes, develop new neural pathways.
I kind of agree. Relinquishing the old and the familiar sometimes can be painful. New thoughts equal expansion, and resistance and contrast precipitates growth, and growth cannot occur without resistance or contrast. Otherwise, we would never leave our comfort zones.
Yes, and also agree with that. And this idea of replacing something, something is replaced when you move on to something else. And I was just thinking about what Patrick might say, our Derridian friend. No, sorry, not Derridian, Deleuzian friend, because I was thinking, well, do you have to let go of something else in order to discover something new or move on to something new? Can there be an and? And is there always a negation in that process? Be interested to know what Patrick might add to that conversation.
Can I say something? Path of self-love means letting go of neurological pathways that no longer serve. So it's a constant honing down, letting go, new improved versions of the self. As we learn to love ourselves and accept ourselves and improve the parameters of what we allow ourselves to receive, or moving the goalposts, as it were.
I just want to say, according to what, just relating to what Vanda was saying, I am having a really painful process learning Spanish, and I'm learning it at the same time as my 3-year-old, who was brought up in Spain and speaks and is learning 4 languages total because of the school that she's at. And there's a local dialect that she's learning, and English. And my wife is French. And for me to let go of being able to communicate and to struggle with new structures is inherently painful and filled with so many other types of like neurosis. But with her, it is, really a joyful process. I can see for her, it's really a very, very different thing, and she has nothing to let go of, or to unlearn, or to something. It's all a new thing for her, and it's really a joyful process. Whereas for me, it really is painful.
Yeah, so I guess at a very young age, your brain is so much more plastic. And as you say, it hasn't stored up, there's other stuff to get rid of. I think for me, I have often thought about trying to learn Chinese, but I don't even know if I even dare go there, actually.
Vanda, is that 1 billion people speak it, so how hard can it be?
Yeah, but they speak it from a very early age.
No, I know, I'm just teasing. Jonathan, coming back to touch and how we perceive, and you mentioned Merleau-Ponty and understanding the world through our body, or words to that effect. And again, just because it's related to the stuff that I'm doing in the PhD, and so it's kind of an area of interest and reading, and I don't have any definitive answers by any means, but just questions. And you look at somebody like Kant, and the best I can understand that for him there would be a schema of how you would understand the world. So let's say you would touch something and there would be kind of, if you like, a neural pathway or a schema in your head that would then cause a perception. But you look at somebody like Deleuze, and he's saying, in the logic of sensation, or Francis Bacon painting, that, taking the idea of touch, that it can go directly to the brain and do something without the use of a schema. And, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, or comparisons, or contrasts.
He was interested, obviously, in the divide between science, philosophy, and art, and what each of them, this is Deleuze, how each of them functions. So, he's particularly interested in the difference between the cognitive and the affective. And he said that art deals with effects, whereas philosophy deals with concepts. So he doesn't negate conceptual thinking, but he comes up. He doesn't categorize in the way that Kant does.
But for Deleuze, it seems that the affects and just are kind of like hardwired straight to your brain, so they kind of bypass some of the other filters or schemas.
Yeah, they're not constructed. They're open to invention. He's against common sense. So common sense tends to make the world as it seems, whereas he wants the world to be open to... he says we don't think very much. So he wants the world to be open to the adventure of thinking. And that means a kind of disavowal of representational structures, disavowal of categories.
Yeah, thank you.
It's a much more fluid relationship to experience and thinking and feeling. he wants to overcome dogma. I mean, what he finds in Bacon is the ability to certainly overturn the academy. And I think he likes in Deleuze the fact that he's not a modernist in the usual sense. Bacon goes to late Rembrandt and late Titian and Velasquez. And his adventure of painting starts there, outside of modern period. And it gives him the opportunity to work out what lateness was. So you get this extraordinary explosion of painting, almost autonomy of painting.
Oh, sorry, didn't mean to cut across you.
Where something arrives outside of itself. So in Bacon, his early paintings, images come out of the accidents of paint. He doesn't know what he's painting yet. So that husband not knowing, of facing material and dealing with it as it emerges, as a becoming of something else.
And how would you compare that to, say, a Mark Rothko painting using that line of analysis?
I mean, certainly there's something slightly skeptical, I think, in relationship to Rothko, with Deleuze. I think he likes the intensity and the all-overness, the shimmer. But I think he's slightly suspicious of it. He's much more interested in Pollock. I mean, he's interested in the sublime, for instance, whereas Léotard is. I mean, all the plastic arts have a relationship to touch, feel. Something emerges through just physically connecting with materiality. And it's likely that surprises. And out of surprise comes the ability to make new forms, to be arrested, to be opened out. Does that answer anything?
Yeah, it does. No, it's very, very helpful. Thank you.
I mean, there's a lot of figures of doubles, the worlding of the world, or a sense of emergence, a sense of folds. things doubling back upon themselves.
Can I just ask you a little bit more about what you said about Bacon and his relationship to Vasquez, Titian, and the other artist who I forget now? In that he obviously, I didn't think you were saying he was influenced by them, or maybe he was, but I think you said he comes out of them, or he bypassed modernity. Could you just talk through that? I'm trying to understand it, and I think what you said about him was really interesting, but could you talk through that a little bit more?
Yeah, he was definitely influenced by. I mean, it was peculiar. He didn't see Velázquez. He didn't go to Spain to see Les Meninas or the great Velázquez paintings. He could have done easily, but he preferred to work from reproductions. So he was definitely not wanting to get too influenced by the technical apparatus of the painting. He was interested in the image and his own stylistic. He didn't want to change his own stylistic relationship to paint. So he was very repetitive in a way. I mean, Bacon's peculiar as a painter. He especially towards the end of his life, he painted Bacon's. He didn't invent anymore. And certainly the thing about late paintings, the history of late paintings, Rembrandt really comes alive with his late paintings. He really discovers a new relationship to paint, and the same with Titian. Titian completely overturns his earlier work. I mean, the incredible adventures of paint, including using his hands and fingers. He was arthritic towards the end of his life. But his solution was to use his fingers rather than brushes. So he had this very sensuous relationship to the surface of the paint. And things would emerge out of the paint which he hadn't formerly seen. So the painting was alive with its own invention. He didn't know what it was going to look like. And they stayed around in his studio for a long time. He didn't know how to finish them. Whereas in the earlier periods, he'd be commissioned to do a portrait. He knew exactly how to finish a portrait. Last night, I was writing something about, or was it this morning, about Mona Lisa. And he painted a Mona Lisa, I think between 1503 and 1506, but he kept it when he was in France until he died in 1517. He never gave it to the commission. And he probably kept painting for almost 15 years. And they always gone about the mystery of Mona Lisa, the smile. But there's something he couldn't complete. And I think he passed from painting a portrait to painting desire itself. But something he couldn't name. He didn't know what it was. So he was pursuing something which was closer to like fascination. He was painting fascination. So it couldn't be, you couldn't see it. You could only feel it. So there's no solution to the mystery of Mona Lisa because he didn't know what it was, what he was painting. But it kept him, he couldn't leave it alone. And desire is the thing in the universe, is the one thing which never completes itself. It always is a negative, moving negation. As soon as desire touches desire, it moves on to another desire. It's continually mobile. Hard to know what it is. I don't know if that's a reasonable account of Mona Lisa. But it's always Mona Lisa and the mystery. That's what we know about it. You know, the unsolved riddle of it, which makes it the most compelling painting in the world, as far as empirical visits. It's always the room where Mona Lisa hangs is always packed out, and the sense of what is it we're trying to see. You can't see it actually. So they're looking at something they can't really see anyway. So it makes it even more strange.
But it is also, isn't it, a bit packed out because it's famous?
Yeah,
I
but
wonder if it
what-
if it wasn't famous, would people, what would it be noticed for? It would be quite interesting to think about.
there's some great Leonardos in the Louvre. The Virgin in the Rocks. There's about 4 paintings, and there's not the same attention, the same artist. I mean, Virgin in the Rocks have the same mysterious landscape as Mona Lisa. Is it a better painting than Virgin in the Rocks, for instance? I mean, certainly it's richer in terms of iconography.
Jonathan,
Yeah.
with something like the Mona Lisa, and you're saying it conveys something or it captivates you, could it do that if it didn't use the human figure as a means of expression?
Yeah, it's that passage from something which is nameable, the name of a woman who he paints in a commission, and then there's this process whereby he doesn't complete it. He doesn't finalize the contract, which is peculiar.
No, but what I'm getting at, I mean, just to give let's say he was painting a bowl of fruit or some non-human figure, could he convey the same feelings with?
I think that a similar process can occur. I mean, like some of the Spanish still lives, for instance, have this strange where you're not sure whether it's an object or a I mean, there's a difference between the object and the sensation of the object. And it's the sensation of the object that sometimes creates an intensity. And so we're looking at something which is impossible. It goes to a threshold.
But then being controversial for a second, an M.C. Escher painting is impossible, but it doesn't give you the same feeling.
No, because there's no process of it's rational. It's just picture puzzle.
But something, just thinking about kind of popular paintings, is it something like Van Gogh's Sunflowers, more about a kind of enigmatic affect that we get from it? Just thinking of what Lester was saying, could an inanimate object convey that same kind of ungraspable, unnameable thing? I mean, to my mind, something like the Sunflowers is more about the affect than the object being depicted.
Yeah, it goes far beyond representation. It's not just an efficient depiction. It's a passion. I think spontaneously people get it. They're not popular out of errancy. But very often they include errancy. I mean, there's a strangeness to the sunflowers. The thickness of the paint. It's not very flower-like in some ways, but it's radiant. So it burns you. It contains the sun. So when he paints cosmic processes. I mean, sorry to be extravagant, but I think that Van Gogh show, the 2 years of his south of France paintings. I mean, it's a different sort of juice, which is painting. It's a dance of energy, it's intensity, it's cosmic processes.
Is there a kind of sort of transgressive pleasure in it, do you think?
Well, he's overturning himself. He's burning. And he's willing to show that he's burning. I mean, he was painting like crazy. I mean, he was doing a painting a day at times. No distance. I mean, I never thought about that too much until I saw that Van Gogh show. I mean, even a little bit skeptical about Van Gogh previously. I thought the narrative was too easy and too stereotyped, but I don't believe that anymore.
I have a question about that, the burning idea, because I was wondering whether before what you were talking about being arrested by something is in that it has a force over you which you kind of overwhelms you or stops you. It's a kind of and you say it kind of opens you up, but I wonder about burning, whether that is an opening up, because it feels like at the same time it's also an implosion or a kind of unbearableness. It's not it feels slightly different to kind of opening up, right?
I mean, I think it's where the interior and exterior cross over. So it's both an opening up and closing down simultaneously. It's a sort of knot of being. It draws lines which have never been drawn before. So it changes what's interior and what's exterior. They start to pass into one another.
Mm-hmm.
The subject of perception, the object of attention become one.
Mm-hmm.
And energy gets let loose.
Can you, with the Carol, it was interesting that you showed the Carolee Sheeman work. And I was just thinking about that when you started to describe this, this process in Bangkok. And I mean, there was a show at Hayward not Hayward, Barbican not long ago. And I just wondered what it took from her, or what kind of internal processes that somehow then externalized, what kind of psychic or mental or physical energy went into that, and what kind of transformation she experienced herself, let alone the impact she had on the viewer. Because it felt like very much like she sort of works on the edge of something.
Yeah, she was part of a generation basically of men. So she appeared in performances of Robert Morris and did walk on parts, and I think she refused the art world and went into the counterculture. So when she did Fuses, it mainly had an audience within counterculture circles, not in the fine art world. I mean, she would never have been purchased by the Tate or something at that time. They wouldn't have accepted it as art. They would have seen it as just a transgressive female artist who's too hippie for her own good. Wasn't serious. So she always walked on the margin. She happened 30 years later, after her work took 30 years to be seen. I remember seeing her doing a showing at the Arts Lab in London. And only about 20 people turned up. And she was doing the introduction to the film. But she had an incredible presence. But she walked an edge. I mean, it was very tough to do a film in which you're having sex with your lover, and she was working with Super 8 cameras. And in a sense, she was a painter who became a filmmaker. But I think she's an important figure. But it was interesting to see her in the raw period when she didn't have a following or didn't have an audience. She still had the confidence to be out there and didn't give up on it.
Yes, thank you. How did you, when you were involved in that show, how did you relate to it at the time? Can you remember, and how did it affect you?
Well, if the film Fuses, we did a showing at Slade, and I got hauled into the office. Head of film who said, "Bloody pornography! What are you doing showing pornography? You'll get us banned." So you get into trouble to be associated with it, even.
Wow.
mean, that was Thorold Dickinson. But I remember this bloody pornography is red in the face, really furious. What? And I said, I didn't. I just went to the arts lab. I didn't know what the film had. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was the whole CCB theatre in the university was packed out. It was about 400 people turned up just to see it at lunchtime.
Hilarious.
I mean, it was very stiff. I mean, despite the counterculture and swinging London, on the whole institution, it was very stiff and very rigid.
Right. But also, I mean, his reactions from the way you describe it sounded angry, and I always think that's quite interesting that you get this kind of someone's pushing your buttons or whatever, get this kind of like it had some kind of haptic effect on him clearly.
Yeah, it was so intense.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'd been his son, it'd hit me. That kind of intensity.
Yeah.
You miscreant. What are you doing bringing that vile stuff into the university? It deserves to be in the arts lab, which was run down ex-milk library. And you saw films lying on mattresses.
Christmas vacation, I have go to the hospital and go to watch the Montrose Museum. And I found that monk, he didn't paint a figure. I feel that he painted the ghost in every his painting, and it's really fabulous. Like like the painter's touch. It's connects me a lot. That feeling. So
I think the secret of all art is there's always something elsewhere, if it's art. Always elsewhere to the setting of the subject or the depiction of an object. There's something which is also not nameable. Otherwise, there's no point. It's academic.
yeah, I mean, the subject is a figure of his friends or like people in town. The sensation of in his painting, I feel that he painted ghosts every brush strokes. So, and before I never saw a painter like that. Just not a question, just sharing.
Anymore. We said we put some time aside for discussion about the next program.
Yeah, just before we do that, can I introduce Opper? Opper, are you there by any chance? So Opper is RCA and RCA Sculpture. I think, Sam, you were in the year together with Opper, if I remember right.
Yeah. How's it going, Opper?
It's good, bro. How are you? It's good to see you.
Mate. Good to see you.
So Opper, Chud, and myself are all in the same studios on Lombard Road in South Wimbledon. So you can see Opper is in the luxury suite upstairs. You've got the wonderful ceiling, and then the great view that is blacked out on his right shoulder there. So anyway, that was the introduction.
Well,
Anyway, you're welcome.
thank you, Jonathan. It's good to be here.
So I'll kick off. I thought some of our gallery visits were great, you know, so I would certainly vote for doing that, because there's something about seeing artwork in person and discussing it, you know, I mean, the Zoom is great because it wouldn't be possible without the Zoom, but there is something special about doing things face to face when possible, you know, once in a while.
I think once a month we do a visit.
Something like that, yeah. Every month, every 6 weeks, you know, whatever, but just, you know, kind of on a semi-regular basis.
I would love to join that. I am just working on this year's travel plan. So most likely for the second half of June and second half of July, I'll be in London or UK. So would love to join one of those outings.
I just wanted to say, I mentioned this a while ago, but and obviously it's kind of super luxurious. I don't know how we could ever make it happen, but it would be amazing to get Jonathan to the Prado one time in Madrid.
I'd love that. Prado's fabulous.
I'd love that too. Brilliant idea.
I mean, you could do it one night, a sort of weekend visit, or just fly out for a 1 or 2 day visit.
With our
Put it into June, July, then I'll come to UK through Spain. How about that?
So when it's 40 degrees in Spain, I can't wait.
There's also a possibility of going to the Louvre in a day.
But that's easier with Eurostar, obviously. So
I mean, you catch the 10 o'clock train is cheaper, isn't it? You get there about 12:30, get to the Louvre at 1, spend 5 hours looking at work. Does anyone know the costs of a day trip to Paris?
I'll look it up and off the side here while we're doing that.
There's a thing called Eurostar Snap. Do you know that?
Hmm?
Eurostar Snap, where I think you get the cheap tickets, but you have to book kind of really, is when they come up. Maybe it's a bit unreliable, but you can get them quite cheap. I'll send the link.
You would do a day trip to the Louvre. How many takers
For
would it?
the reminder, we all need to get to those electric visa now to go to anywhere in Europe, isn't it? I
Yeah.
think so. Even UK passport holders too.
I think it's a great idea. I'd love to go.
And someone mentioned another visit to Oxford. There's a Kiefer show.
Mm.
It was April the 16th we went to Oxford last year, Jonathan. We could make it an anniversary trip.
Mm. I mean, it's a very good day. I mean, Oxford is about an hour and 10 minutes away, hour and 20 minutes. 15 minutes, 20 minutes walk to the museum.